Welcome everyone to the 28th Miami Jewish Film Festival, the largest Jewish film festival in the world. We want to thank all of our members, sponsors, community members, volunteers, all of you film lovers, and especially our presenting sponsors, SAGE, the Center for the Advancements of Jewish Education, and the Greater Miami Jewish Federation for their continued support throughout these years. My name is Dr. Hannah Baruch. I am a teacher at Sheikh Hillel Community School, and today I'm very excited to be moderating a virtual conversation with Tammy Federman about her new documentary Memory Game, which is premiering at this year's festival. So, Tammy, thank you for joining us, and I want to say congratulations on creating such a beautiful and meaningful project. It really is moving. So, to begin, I would like to ask you what inspired this project, and were you involved from its inception, or did you join later?
First of all, thank you so much for having me. It's really an honor and a pleasure to be taking part in this wonderful festival. So thank you so much. This is actually my third documentary, and my previous documentary, I worked with Holocaust survivors who are artists. I mean, maybe I'll start quickly with my first documentary. My first documentary was actually about my sister. I had a sister who passed away, and I made a documentary about her life. She was an incredible artist. She was an artist and really a very exceptional woman and very interesting and important and meaningful. And I created a documentary that follows, goes between her artwork and her life. And it was just very meaningful. And I ended up premiering it in Jerusalem Film Festival in Israel, which was a wonderful experience. And I
Beautiful.
toured with it. And then I finished that film and I thought, wow, this is such a an incredible experience because I was coming in from creating music initially and writing music, and so this was sort of a creation that was visual storytelling with the music and I just felt that I could continue on this incredible journey, and I always wanted to work with Holocaust survivors. That's something that's always been very close to my heart. And I've been very interested in the connection between trauma and art and healing and using art and creativity as a form of healing. So my second documentary, I found five Holocaust survivors who are incredible artists, and I followed them telling their story through the medium of art. And with this third documentary, I was exploring, and I wasn't sure what my third, what this journey was going to lead me on. And I was asked to interview a Holocaust survivor, and I did it, because I really wanted to help. It was for a charity for an event they were doing. And I ended up meeting this incredible woman called Sarah, who is you see her in the film. And just as we were about to wrap the interview, she said, and she had this incredible life story, and she really touched me, and her presence was beautiful. And she said, "Well, just so you know, I'm performing with my theater company. If you want to come and watch us." And I turned around and I said, "What theater company?" She said, "We have a theater company of Holocaust survivors, and we travel all over the country." And the cinematographer I work with, who is incredibly talented, um, his name is Itai Raziel. He said to me, "We should make a movie about her, and we should follow her story." And I said, "Itai, forget about just making a movie about her life. She's talking about a theater company of Holocaust survivors. That sounds incredible. I've never heard of anything like this. Let's follow her." And it's we started to follow her, and it was very homogenic. It was very, I don't want to say coincidental, but it was in the sense of going on a trip and discovering things, and the story sort of happened. So, and I ended up finding this incredible group that's led by Tammy Federman, who's an incredible woman. And I just thought that these group of Holocaust survivors are, I mean, hopefully you feel it for yourself in the film, but they're so full of life, and there's this beautiful dynamic of their difficult stories, but at the same time, this love of life, this connections between them. And I just thought, when we followed them, and it was really lucky as well because they said, "Actually, we're going for a trip in Eilat." And I said, "We
Yeah.
have to film this trip." and this is incredible. What are the odds? This was the first time they went abroad, for not in the country, not abroad, but they were going for like a long trip. And I said, we have to try and film it. And we managed to film it. And this is how sort of the story came to be. We started following them throughout the country. And so I knew I was hoping to make a movie, but like all great things, the road itself is wiser than the person who treads on it. So I discovered things along the way, and luckily, against all odds, this little meaningful film came to be. So that's really how this film happened.
That's incredible. Just to clarify, when you said Sarah, this incredible woman, is she the therapist who talks to them throughout the documentary, or is that
No,
somebody else? Because I couldn't figure out her name.
yeah. So Tammy Fayut is the lady that you see, the therapist that works with them.
Okay.
Sarah is the woman who is the singer. She sings a lot of the time.
Oh,
She has
beautiful.
she's just very, very present in the group. But I was really, really moved by the work that they were doing with them, and I thought Tammy Chayut, the woman who works with this group, and all of the people in the center that do amazing work with these Holocaust survivors. Um, yeah, it's just I think it's beautiful what they do, the kind of work they're doing.
Definitely. Talking about that, a few times the survivors mention Amcha when I came to Amcha. Can you clarify for us what is Amcha and what role did it play in supporting the theater group?
So even when I interviewed Holocaust survivors in my previous film, they kept mention Amcha, which is an incredible charity that works with Holocaust survivors on their emotional
Stress?
stress and their story, and helping them tell their story. And really, this theater company is run by Tami Chayut inside of Amcha, inside this organization. And as you see in the story, she works with these Holocaust survivors, and some of them don't tell their story in the beginning. And through the theater company, she's able to, through therapy, through drama therapy, she's able to allow them to tell their story. And the group, I mean, this center is incredible because they do dancing for them, they do movement for them, they do choir for them, and it really gives them sense of community. It gives them a feeling of belonging, and it allows them to find healing and meaning. And I really enjoyed going to that center and seeing the incredible work and the community that they've created. So yeah,
Yeah.
I'm a wonderful organization. They do incredible work.
Thank you for clarifying. Just to have an idea of a timeline, when did the project begin and about how long did it take to complete it?
Wow, it's hard for me to think of timelines myself because there was so many things that happened in the middle, and of course with everything that's happened recently, this film was I would say that it took. It's hard for me to say because we filmed it in because it
Section.
wasn't organized, it was different time. So first we did the interview, then we heard of the theater company, then we went. So it was kind of spread out through a period of maybe over a year, different time episodes. And then we started following them in different places in the side of the country. And then towards the end, there was this big trip to Eilat, which was like a huge thing for for them to go on such a big trip as a group. These are very elderly people, so for them to go on such a trip together was, and to have like a sleeping in a hotel and all of that, that was just a big deal. So it took a long time, and then there was also in the beginning, I had a lot of interviews that I did with them one on one, and then in the end, I minimized that amount of those. I didn't really use that footage as much. I wanted more the dynamic and the scenes between them. Again, with Holocaust survivors, each story is an epic. They all have there's so many details in the story. There's so many almost coincidences of how they managed to survive. So many things that had to happen along the way for them to actually be here today. So there was a lot of information, and we had to sort of break it down apart and then sort of make the film. So it's hard for me. I would say over a year we filmed it. But again, it wasn't very focused. It was sort of different timelines throughout the year where we were able to follow them and follow their theater company.
Correct. Now, before I move on, over a year, but when did you start? Like, could you have a year that you can tell us? This was 2020,
Um,
after, recent, like last year, 2023?
I would say I started maybe 2020, towards 2023 or towards the end of
Also,
20.
it's very recent.
Yeah, yeah, I would say.
Okay.
But it took a while,
Beautiful.
and then the post-production was kind of also long. Um, yeah, so it took a while, but we made it happen, which is really the important thing, I think.
Beautiful. So now I'd like to talk about some of the challenges that you might have met along the process. So first of all, were there trained psychologists involved throughout the entire process to help the survivors navigate their emotions?
That's a great question. The center has Tammy, who is a counselor and extremely experienced therapist, and she was able to give a lot of information. And we worked always with her, and always, for example, when I spoke, for example, with the day when I talked to them about the mother figure, that's
Yeah.
something that I sort of navigated with her. So I came up to her and I said, I feel that I would love to talk about their memories because they were all children. And I'm curious to see there's the connection with the mother. How can we talk about that? And she sort of thought, you know what, let's do this exercise. So we were really collaborating with her. We are obviously, she's very, very experienced. She knows the group very, very well. She knows each and every one of them. A lot of them, when they came, they hadn't told their story. They were, very quiet. They were very shy. I think the biggest arch in terms of the character arch that you really see at the beginning and sort of the process of the character is with the story of Rivka, where
Yeah.
she comes in. At first, she's very quiet, and it takes you a while to understand that she was a child that was told to be quiet. And so the journey of actually finding her voice and telling this happens during the process of filming it.
Wow.
So when she speaks for the first time, we filmed that. And to be honest, we didn't even know it was going to be her first time. She just said it to us before she went on stage. She said, that today she's speaking for the first time. And we just rushed with the camera and we said we have to get this. This is so meaningful. And then you manage to see her slowly coming to terms with her story and owning her story. And what an incredible story. In the end, she became a lawyer. She did all these things at a very
Yeah.
late age in life. And she seems quiet and gentle, but what a fierce and powerful and graceful spirit she has. So I think you can really see how the work affects these people and how they changed and how they're able to sort of take their very, very difficult trauma and create something really beautiful and inspiring out of it.
Definitely inspiring. By the way, I forgot to tell you that I teach in a high school. I teach Jewish history and psychology. So this was fascinating to me on so many levels. And for my next question, I was wondering, how did you manage to film such vulnerable moments as you just described without compromising their dignity or their emotional safety?
Wow, that's a very big question. I think it's interesting that you say because I was so moved by Tammy Chayut's work that I'm in the process of becoming a drama therapist. So I'm
Wow.
studying towards the end of my studies of drama and movement psychotherapy. So I'm working currently with dementia clients and with vulnerable children. And the reason I wanted to have that is because I felt that I needed more tools and I wanted to learn from what Tammy was doing. But I also, I was so moved by what she does with the theater company, and it inspired me to learn more. And I think what one of the things that I noticed was that when you interview someone, it's a form of therapy. So, for example, the story of Dina, who talks about the very difficult relationship she had with her mother, that she said that the mother rejected her and she sort of projected onto her, the guilt and all of this very difficult relationship. When we interviewed her, it was very, very cathartic for her
Yeah.
because we spoke about it afterwards and I thanked her and she said, well, actually, after I was interviewed, I went to sleep and I had the best sleep that I hadn't had for
Wow.
many years. And I felt such a release. And I learned all throughout my previous documentary that sometimes when people tell their story to the camera, there is a real sense of release in itself. Filming someone in an interview that feels safe and contained can give a lot of comfort, and it's a form of therapy. And with my previous documentary, I actually had this incredible story of a woman. I had finished for the documentary to film all of the participants, and there was one artist who we found, and some of the people I was working with were saying we have too many participants, and I said, you know what, let's meet with her, because if someone wants to talk, we have to give them the opportunity. It's more important than anything. And this woman came and she told this story that was incredible, that her whole life she didn't want to talk about the Holocaust. Her children don't know anything about the Holocaust. And she told her story for the first time. It was incredibly powerful. And her whole life she's been trying to not accept the story and not talk about it. And in the end, when I thanked her for it, she said, well, actually, I want to thank you, your cure, for coming and for filming me, because after being interviewed for the film, I sat with my children and my grandchildren, and for the first time I told them what had happened to me in the Holocaust. Because I thought, if I can be interviewed, then I can sit down, and it made me understand that this cycle of healing can start, and it can affect. Can you imagine, for her grandchildren, for her family? And her son also came up to me. We had a premiere in Israel, and the son came up to me and he said there were people in the audience who didn't know she was a Holocaust survivor because she had kept it as a secret her whole life. And he said, I'm so happy finally my mother is telling her story. And I think it can really bring about a sense of healing. And it's very important, the feeling of containment, like you said, to really be present with the person, to make sure that they lead it, that it's told on their terms, that they feel safe. And of course, that's the kind of support I was getting from the center, from Tammy Fayut, and that's the tools that I'm getting more and more of them, hopefully now, so that I can continue to support and be very mindful and careful. Because the first thing is really protecting the person who's being interviewed, and having huge respect, because I truly believe, I'll just say one last thing, that when someone shares with you their story, they're really giving you the most vulnerable and intimate part of themselves. And it's something that I cherish and I value deeply, and I hold it with grace and with a lot of respect. So so that's definitely something that I think about and I value, and I do my best to hold that and to cherish that.
Well, I really appreciate that because that's a thought I was having constantly was while watching the documentary. When I noticed every time the survivors shared their stories, the pain resurfaces. And
Mm.
that's something that they all expressed. Like we saw in Boy Ima, which was really, it made me cry. And my question was, how did you balance encouraging them to talk, as you said, which is incredible. For some of them, it was their first time, while being mindful of how much emotion and pain was going to resurface at that moment.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think I was constantly with Tammy, so there was always another person who knows them very, very well, who knows their limits, who knows their experience. And I think for Tammy, this is actually what I think was very, very evident. The only interview, if I'm not mistaken, the only interview I had to put in the film was actually the therapist herself, because I thought that was very meaningful when she tells that she actually came to the realization that her own father was a Holocaust survivor, and
Yes.
she didn't understand
All of his behaviors.
all his behaviors until she started treating people. And really, what she's doing is what we would say tikkun. She's trying to correct the fact that she doesn't know her father's story. And she says, this is why it's so important for me that they talk, so their stories do not, because I think one of the biggest frustrations for people who are growing with parents or Holocaust survivors or grandparents is the unknown. We say the monsters are scariest in the dark. There's something about knowing what happened there or sharing the story. It's very, very hard to Maya Angelou said it's to carry the burden of an untold story. And I think that's why Tammy Chayut is, because she doesn't know what happened to her father in the Holocaust, and she even carries, perhaps, if I may say, guilt. Why didn't I ask my father? I've interviewed a lot of people who say I didn't. I was so afraid of upsetting them that I actually don't know. I don't know the story of what my grandparents went through. So for her, she believes that it's so important that they talk, and she says it's so important for me that they tell the story, that it's recorded, that it doesn't get lost, that it is shared, however painful it is. And I think that and I think that's the healing for them, that they tell their story, that it's not forgotten, that the youth hear it, that it is remembered, that we know that we shared it, however painful it is. So yeah, that I think that for me is something that really stood out, the importance of sharing these stories and keeping them alive. Of course, never forgetting, but also allowing these people to share some of the burden and share their story.
Yeah, and some of them are very difficult. Thank you, Tammy. Now I want to talk about some key moments in the documentary. As we said before, one of the most poignant moments to me was Rivka's story, her hesitation to speak in the beginning, and eventually she finds her voice. So, can you share more about that transformation? Maybe something that you didn't necessarily put in the movie, something you personally witnessed?
I think it was just, I think most of it, I would say, you can see in the film itself. It was just really incredible to see someone who was almost afraid of her voice. She was so quiet in the beginning. It was so hard for her to take up space, to share her story. She was kind of giggling at the side, and also the fact that you never really know what people are going through when you judge them, because in the beginning the people are sort of, oh, she's always quiet, why
Yeah.
does she never talk, and they kind of dismiss her. And when you realize why does she never talk, because she was silenced and she was told, and she was put literally almost choked to death with a gag, to be quiet since she was a child. So you never know why people behave the way they do, what have they experienced, what trauma are they keeping within them. And it makes you very compassionate and very curious about other people, I think, for me. And for me, just the incredible arc and transformation of seeing her at the end telling her story, and with sort of pride telling, and I became a lawyer at the end. And I thought that was incredible. It was also beautiful for me it didn't go into the movie, but to interview her in her home, to spend time with her. Um, to see, the way she lives, her things, her books, her apartment is full of books. Like, this woman reads so much. She's so knowledgeable. I love, this is just something of my own. I love spending time with elderly. I love spending time with women who know how to fill their well. They're full of wisdom for themselves. I mean, you can see she just sits in her apartment and she reads and she learns and she's curious and never stop learning. Always, I found her so inspiring. And I also love the fact about her that there's a grace in her gentleness. People who are gentle and quiet are easily dismissed. Introverts are sort of easily unseen. But if you go into her world and and I was fortunate enough to come into her house, and she opened the door for me and she made me a cup of tea and we sat. What a beautiful life she lives, and so much knowledge and beauty. And I thought, what an incredible person. So I think one of the interesting things in documentary is getting a glimpse into people's worlds. It's the same with therapy. You really get to see the divine or the beauty in every person, in their story. And I'm just honored that I got to meet a woman like her, and all the people that are in the movie. For me, it's an honor that I was able to get to know them.
Thank you, Tammy. I'm definitely going to share that with my students. I think it's such a powerful and beautiful lesson, getting to know the divine in another, looking at them from a place of compassion, instead of judging or dismissing or not noticing. That's really beautiful. Talking about the song Boi Ima that they sing at some point, that really reflects on the painful longing of, for their lost ones who they loved so much. How was it decided to incorporate this or even other artistic element into the documentary?
And the song Boy Ima, it's such a beautiful song, and it's so sad. Uh,
Yes.
they used it for their show. So this was part of the play that they had created. And when we did that interview, and I said to Tammy, I want to speak today about the role of the woman. She was incredibly creative. She just knew straight, not the woman, sorry, the role of the mother. I want to speak about the mother. Um, she just knew straight away how to engage with them, and she came up with the idea, let's do an exercise. If you could tell me something about your mother, and each one of them so beautifully contributed something so personal. Um, and then, sort of very naturally and homogenically, they started to sing the song from their play.
Oh,
It wasn't something that I prompt them. A lot of the work was really, for me, I think in documentary, a lot of it is really similar to when you're working with a client to really, they say in therapy, meet them where they're at. So if you're working with dementia clients, you meet them where they're at. You don't try to bring them into the present moment. You really follow people where they're at. And I like that with a documentary. And when I was working with them, I didn't force the situation too much. It was very much about being an observer, following at their own pace. It wasn't like there was a huge script and a huge production company. We're a very, very small team. It's basically me and the cinematographer. There may be two or three, and the man doing the sound. So we're trying to be very, very delicate and compassionate and really let them feel comfortable. And luckily, the cinematographer I work with is such a delicate and gentle,
beautiful.
sensitive man. So really, it was allowing them to be in their presence and just being very gentle and being there. I wasn't directing or being very forceful or um,
Very, very nice. Thank you, Tammy. To continue on that song, one of the survivors, I don't remember exactly who said, the more time passes, the stronger the longing becomes. And the title of your documentary is Memory Game, playing with that, looking back at their memories or lack of memories. And I was wondering, how did this moment capture the intersection between memory and the enduring love that they have, even though so much time has passed?
I think it's interesting because uh, it's grief is a journey and it never really ends and it changes. I mean, of course, it's very different and everyone has their own encounter with grief, and it's also an inevitable part of life because we're all life is fleeting, at least the physical element of life, and so for my own understanding of grief, it never really changes. It never really ends. It changes form. It evolves. So I think that so I think for them, one of the things that they're saying is that they never really stop missing, or they're longing for their mother. It never ends. I think one of the stories that really surprised me is when my own grandmother passed away. I thought she was very old. Now I think she was young, but at the time I was quite young myself. And I said to my own mother, "Why, I know grandmother, you loved her so much, but she was old and she was unwell, and it's a natural part of life." And my mother said to me this beautiful sentence. She said, you only stop being a child when you lose your parent, because next to your parent you always stay a child." And it took me a while to understand that even if if you're an older woman or you're an older man, when you stand next to your parent, you will always feel in the eyes of the child. You will always feel a child when you're standing next to your parent, and you stop being a child only when your parent is gone, in a sense. So I think that longing for being a child, it's always there, and the longing for the parent and the missing them, it's always present with you. That's something that I've noticed with my work with documentary and with people that I work with. And in terms of the name, I'm happy we found that name because I think it incorporates this idea of memory, and also for me the idea of drama therapy, of game, of having playfulness. Again, this combination between Peter Slade speaks about child drama and about being a child and playing. So the playfulness is connected very much to the inner child, and memory is connected to loss. And so all of these elements come into play when you talk about sort of memory game. So they're coming into the childlike, going into the memory, this kind of game of memories and nostalgia, and trying to hold on to a memory and how it sort of fades, but you still feel it very present for you. So I really like the title, and hopefully it sits well with the story.
It does. I would like to now talk about maybe connections or impact of the documentary. So I'm curious to know if the students who interacted with the survivors stayed in touch after the performances.
Um, I think I can't say specifically about specific students, but there's definitely been an impact. I think you can see that it was really important for me to get the children and their responses and the youth. I thought that was a very, very big thing in the film, and I love the way the youth interacts with them. And I think that's also a huge part for them in their healing process. Um, I also always feel that, there's this wonderful book called Death is of Vital Importance, and she talks about the idea that in society, the elderly would always live, if you were living like they did in the old days, you'd have the old person living with a child. And so the elderly, naturally, there's something with connection between the elderly and youth or elderly with children is really a natural cycle of life. So, and unfortunately, today we have the elderly in a retirement home and not always engaged with young people. And when you see the connection actually with elderly people and young people, it's so natural, it's so empowering for the young people to learn from elderly wisdom. Because if you look at all the great wisdoms, it's always going to the elderly and asking them for their guidance. And that's something that I've always gravitated towards. We like to admire people for all different reasons, for a lot of the wrong reasons, I think. But when you sit with people who are elderly and have life experience, especially Holocaust survivors, they have so much wisdom to give, such grace and such an ability to take such deep suffering and bring meaning, that these are the people that I want to sit and learn from, because these are the people that I found so inspiring, and I think you can see with the youth as well. They're so moved by them, they're so inspired. And I think that connection of the youth and these elderly people is really, you can feel that kind of connection being made. Um, and I think they feel inspired by them, and they hopefully the elderly people feel meaningful again, which I think is important to both sides, to both people.
That was actually going to be my next question. In short, what was the biggest takeaway for you from the interactions between these survivors and the youth, if you had to point to one?
I think that giving the inspiration and the power, actually the hope that they give to the youth. I think especially nowadays, with everything that's happened to us, that's been such a difficult time. I mean, there are no words to express what actually happened. Um, since the 7th of October. So it's something that it's going to take time for us to even understand what's happened. And I think that the only hope that you can find is looking at people like Holocaust survivors and thinking, the Jewish people have always experienced such difficult, I don't know, any other nation or people that can rise from such difficult circumstances and have, hope. Because, I heard someone speaking and he said, no matter what we encounter, we always, when we sing a tikva, we always sing of hope. We always hope for something. And we can never let go of our hope. And when you sit with Holocaust survivors, I think that is what is really moving. They have every reason to be bitter and to be negative or to see everything in such a dark light. And they don't. They actually uplift. They actually take these young people and they say to them, "We have hope. We see a future." And I think in these very dark and difficult times that we're going through, I think hopefully we can get a little bit of light or a little bit of hope from these people because they've come from such unbearable darkness. So when I sit with Holocaust survivors, I always think, I, if they can find the power within them to find meaning in life, if they can uplift, if they go as Holocaust survivors into society, some of the Holocaust survivors I met work with youth, with children with difficulties. They're contributing to the society. They're the ones who are going. I met Holocaust survivors who are doing a man who does puppetry and goes to children to children who are in a cancer ward, and he does puppetry for them. I mean, if that is not grace and beauty and light, then I don't know what is, because people who really have so little and have endured so much, and instead of being consumed by darkness, they're sharing so much light. So for me, I'm just in awe and honored to be in the presence of these people, to share their story, and hopefully to give a little bit of hope and a little bit of light that maybe, better days can come, and, you know, we can always continue to hope for better times.
Well, you just answered my next four questions, so thank you for that. But I will still continue. I have a few more for you, if that's okay. As you mentioned, going through a difficult, challenging year post October 7th, do you have new thoughts or perspectives on the themes of resilience and healing in the film? Do you think this could be a model that could maybe be used for all our current generation who is going through the trauma of this ongoing war?
It's, as I said, it was very hard. I filmed this before the 7th of October, and it got, completely different meaning. There are some moments in it when they say, "May you never ever experience," and you think that we never saw it coming, or thinking that we would experience that what happened on the 7th of October. Um, I don't know. I mean, it's so vast that I don't know what I can even offer, or what I can say apart from that, maybe a little bit of hope, as I said, because when I meet these Holocaust survivors, I think if they can rise out of such darkness, then maybe better days will come one day, or I don't know. It's hard to say, but it does show that this, I think, for me, what was also difficult is when I speak to some of the Holocaust survivors, I think for them, what happened was almost, it was difficult for many Holocaust survivors, because they felt unsafe again and felt scared again. So it's been a really difficult time. But as I said, we never lose hope, and yeah, we're strong, and we can hopefully get a little bit of inspiration from these incredible people to see their incredible resilience, and just be inspired by them, and hopefully get some a little bit of comfort, and hoping for better times.
I'm into that. Before I ask you for a message for the future, can you touch up just a little bit on that? If I understood correctly, you said that they're unsafe again, they're feeling scared again. How have you witnessed the impact of October 7th on these survivors? I mean, this is opening back wounds that they never thought would be open. They're in Israel, they made it. They're still longing, but they have a meaningful life. And yet, in their own home, something so
Yeah.
tragic, so uneven, unimaginable happened again.
I think when you speak about the theater group, they're very resilient. They're very positive. And when I was talking, I was thinking of someone actually from a former film that I made, who, when I spoke to her, she said it brought back a lot of post-trauma, the feelings that she had endured during the Holocaust. It really depends on the person and themselves, how they experience it. But I think for the Jewish nation, for everyone, it brought about this feeling of, you know, we're never really safe. And I think it's part of the identity of knowing that we always have to fight. It's never going to be easy. It's never going to be safe. We always know that we need to um, sort of to be ready to get up and leave if we have to. I think that's something about that state of mind of the Jewish tradition. I think um, we've always sort of had to fight to exist, and
Rise from
so
the ashes.
yes. um yeah, I mean, I do feel that when I speak to Tammy and the people from the center, they're just still very, very positive, and they're still, they're touring, and they're performing, and they're inspiring others, and they're doing really incredible things. And for me, I think I can only speak of myself. They bring me a lot of hope, and I'm definitely incredibly inspired by their grace and by everything that they do. Just to think of the courage it takes to stand up and share your story when it's so painful, as you said, just to share and to go back to those memories, and they do it in order to share their story. So yeah, I can only say how inspired and how moved I am by these people.
Definitely. I have two more questions and then we're going to wrap up if that's okay. So, I think you touched upon that throughout the last, few questions. What is one message that you hope that this film delivers to the younger generations?
Um, I think for the younger generation and for anyone who watches it, I've always been intrigued by, in my previous film as well. And I think this is something even in my first film, I was thinking about. One of the books that really moved me was Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. When I
Mhm.
was a child, we had this book my mother kept it. And I always remember sort of the cover of the book, and I was always scared of looking at it, but it was so powerful to me, this question, man's search for meaning. And I think this idea that in the greatest darkness of all, you search for the meaning and you have to find it. For me, um, I've throughout my work with people and my with documentary, with interviewing people, I've come to believe and to see that life is a choice. Um, Meaning is a choice. It's quite existential, I know, to think this way, but I do believe belief is not something that there's difference between believing and knowing. It's not a knowing, it's a belief, and we don't have to, but whatever you believe, whatever you create, that's what you're creating. That's what's going to be. So for me, working with Holocaust survivors is taking the great worst possible scenario, the greatest darkness that I can encounter or think of, and showing that even in the greatest of darkness, people can find meaning. That is really what I'm looking at and what I'm curious about, because in my own loss, which is, of course, I can't make the comparison at all, I can think to myself, whatever loss you may experience, if you find a way of taking something it or growing out of it or contributing to others or creating some kind of wisdom or making art out of it, you have always the choice if to let something completely break you or to build something from it. And no greater inspiration than these people who, as I said, I took, the most difficult example of the hardest stories you can imagine. These stories are difficult to hear, and yet these people are not, in darkness, in bed, giving up on life. On the contrary, there's a real liveliness, a livelihood within them, a spark, a wantingness to survive, a meaning to share their story. So I think for me, this is really about choice, about your search for meaning, your choice for, and even as I said, in these very dark times, how will we rise out of this? Because we always have a choice. That is our free will, and that is possibly the only thing that we have is who are we. They can take everything from you, but they can't take your soul. And so who you want to be. And for me, these people, that is what they represent, this grace and this ability to rise out of greatest darkness. So I hope that for the youth, it gives a sense of hope and a sense of, growing out of something, even out of difficult and dark times.
And to conclude, exactly, you're touching upon that. I feel like you're guessing all my questions as you're going. I wanted to ask you, what do you personally find most powerful about their stories, and what can all audiences, learn from their strength and their determination to keep growing and healing? Because that's really the purpose over here.
Yeah, I think for me, you know, nowadays, I don't know if I really like this term, trauma survivors, people who grow out of darkness, because I think, there's all these ideas of the cracks is how the light comes in. There's this Japanese art, I forgot the name of it, where they take things that are whatever breaks, instead of throwing it, they take gold and they put it back together, and they use this. They use things that are broken, but they break them back together and they build something beautiful out of it. And I always think that you cannot really grow if everything out of comfort. There's all these images of that, and of God, of course, I'm not saying this is a very extreme form of trauma. We're talking about the worst form of trauma with Holocaust survivors. But, there is always a point if you choose to, whatever it is that happens, you can either break or you can grow from it. And I think that is the only choice when you summarize it, this is what we have. And when you look at the greatest, most inspiring people, they've not always had a very easy life, and they've had to endure. And for me, as I said, Holocaust survivors, I mean, such difficult lives, and they're not feeling sorry for themselves, and they're not sitting and complaining. I've seen 90, almost 100-year-old man. I didn't have half the energy the man that I worked with in my previous documentary. He was making when I
Incredible.
came to his whole house was sculptures and paintings, and he's working 10 hours a day on his feet, creating sculptures. And I felt old next to him because he had way more energy. And when I was filming that, COVID came in, and so I called him on Zoom, and I was so worried about him. And I said, "How are you?" And it was amazing because he said, "Well, actually, now that I can't see my grandchildren and I'm stuck at home, I've started to work out." And he was almost 100. I mean, he was in late 90s, and he started to show me that he took these tiny, I don't know, 1 kilogram weight, and he was doing workouts, and I looked at myself and thought, I'm feeling sorry for myself for COVID because, because this is so, it just shows you, because at the time it was COVID and people were complaining all the time. And it made me think, and I was complaining because, it was a difficult time for a lot of people with not being able to see parents who are elderly, or being inhibited, or the things that you complain about. And when I saw him, and I thought he's almost 100 and he's taking this opportunity to start working out in his 90s, then really I should not complain, and I should probably think in a positive mind growth, and think how I can contribute and what I can do for others. And so I think that is really sort of what I'm looking at in my little point of view, in my little life. How can I take every difficult situation and try to create something beautiful out of it? And for me, art is, or creating these movies, or working with people, or trying to do the little that I can do. It's always about taking this difficulty, or this trauma, or this challenge, and trying to create something beautiful out of it. So hopefully, these incredible people inspire others. And as I feel so inspired and honored to have met these people, and learn from them. Um, yeah.
Well, I think that I'm personally inspired by all these incredible people, but having spoken to you now, I'm inspired by you. You really took your personal story, a story of tragedy and pain, and I can now have a whole new level of appreciation for the love and the sensitivity that you put into that project. A project like this that is so complicated and sensitive and has so many layers to it can only be put together by someone who has the heart and the understanding of that kind of sensitivity. And I think you did a beautiful job. So I would like to conclude by saying thank you very much to producer Tammy Federman for joining us. And once again, I want to thank you, all of our members, our sponsors, community partners, volunteers, all of you film lovers, and especially our presenting sponsors, SAGE, the Center for the Advancement of Jewish Education, and the Greater Miami Jewish Federation for their continued support throughout all these years. And thank you, our audience, for participating in the 28th Annual Miami Jewish Film Festival.